The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, UNU Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Live from Boston, Massachusetts, I'm scheduled with Les Skymo and my special guest, Dave. And I've got a very, very special guest here, Jane Doe. And I want to thank all of our troops stationed around the world and their families for their sacrifice that keeps America free. God bless you, and folks, pray for them. Now, folks, you know this show is a look at life through the eyes of a conservative Christian, and we've got a very special guest here tonight, and the best way that I can do this is just let her tell her own story. Now, folks, you can go to Armed Radio Group News on Facebook, complete lineup of our shows there. Also, you can call in tonight. Call in at 1-800-508-5431. Now, if you would, I'll start taking calls at 7:30. I want Jane to get through her story here, and before we start asking any questions or anything. But, folks, this is something that if you've been a victim yourself, hopefully this will help every one of you. So, Jane, take your time and at your own pace and tell us your story.
Okay. Before I tell you what happened to me, I want to tell you that God brought me through the experience because I couldn't do it by myself. If God had not brought me through, I would never have made it through. But you know, He's always there. God lets things happen to the just as well as the unjust, and He always has a reason. It took me a while to realize why God let it happen to me. He knew that He would give me ways to help victims to go through these things, and maybe help them recognize the signs of people who would hurt them and therefore keep them away from the people who would hurt or kill them or the members of their family.
You're doing good, Sue. Jane, doing good. Let me move this through your papers here.
This incident happened in 1985, and I hope by me telling you what happened to me, it will help you either get over it if it's happened to you, or to be on guard and know what to look for so you won't have to go through things like this. After I tell you what happened to my family and me, I will be glad to answer your questions. There are some things that I don't remember because of shock and the medication the doctor put me on after my initial statement at the sheriff's office. There may be times I'll get a little emotional while talking, so please be patient with me. When my youngest daughter was 17 years old, we lived with my mother because she was too ill to live by herself. And when she got better, we moved back to our own home. My daughter went to church with a friend of hers and met this young man, and they started dating. This young man had a lot of trouble with his parents and his two brothers. They were very close, but when they had fights, they did it with 2x4s. Shortly after my daughter started dating this young man, he got into an argument with his parents and decided to run away and wanted my daughter to go with him. When she refused, he threatened to kill himself. So she called me to tell me she was leaving. He wanted them to get married. They went to another state and found out he wasn't old enough. And after being gone for 2 days, my daughter told him she was going home. and he could do whatever he wanted to. On the way back, he told my daughter she had to quit smoking and started driving very fast and was driving toward a concrete support for an overpass and wouldn't slow down or turn away from the overpass support until she promised she would quit. They dated until he was old enough to get married without his parents' consent. He kept telling her if she quit seeing him or did not marry him, he would kill himself. She really believed he would do this, and she would not be able to live with the guilt she would feel. On his 18th birthday, they got married and stayed with us for a few months. During that time, my daughter was not allowed to help with housework, cook any meals, or spend any time with her dad or me. She had to go to their bedroom and spend every minute locked in their room with him. She was not allowed any phone calls or to go see any of her friends. I was not aware of the fact she wasn't allowed. She just kept telling me it was her idea and she wanted to spend all her time with him. For a few weeks they would stay at his parents' house, and all the time he was supposed to be looking for work and couldn't find any. When they moved out and lived alone, he used to bring my daughter to see me, and she wasn't allowed to talk much. She just had to sit in his lap and listen to him talk to us. She was always asking us if we had any pain pills for her migraine headaches or if Granny had any muscle relaxers because her neck hurt. She had a stiff neck because of the way she slept, when in reality he was picking her up by her neck and shaking her by her neck, trying to get her to do what he wanted her to, or just to show her he could make her do anything that he wanted her to. When I went to visit her, he was gone, and I saw a picture of me that she had in a frame. He had shot BB holes in my forehead. When he got mad at her, he would hurt her small dog or shoot at my picture as a way to let her know what he would do if she didn't do exactly what he wanted. He would get her down on the bed and put a pillow over her face and try to smother her. When he knew she wasn't going to tolerate any more abuse, he would tell her he would kill her family, starting with her granny. My mother lived alone, and she lived close to his parents out in the country. She was very sick. My daughter knew my mother was not able to defend herself against him. He also threatened to kill her dad and me, so she stayed with him. One day he brought her to the house for a visit, and one of my sisters was there with her daughter and her twin sister's daughter. The girls were around 7 and 9 years old. I looked outside to check on the girls, and he had one of them on his shoulders and the other one's hand, leading them across the field toward the woods. I made him bring them back. He really got angry with me, but I just couldn't ignore the feeling in the pit of my stomach. A few days later, I got a call from one of my brother-in-laws saying he was going to file charges against him. He had been touching both girls that day. He was charged with gross sexual imposition. He was found guilty and sentenced to 2 one-year sentences to be served at the same time, and he was to be released to go to work and then report back to jail as soon as he got off work. He was sentenced to begin serving his time on Monday. He was given the weekend to get his things in order before he was to report to jail. During the first part of the trial, my daughter was still living with him, but before the trial was over, her dad and I heard about some of the things he had been doing to her. After church one night, during the trial, we went to see her where she worked. Her dad told her if she wanted to stay with her husband because she loved him, okay, we would stay out of it. But if she was staying with him because she was afraid he will hurt her grandmother or me and your mother, don't. I will protect you and us. If you don't want to live with him, you can come home with us and we will help you. My daughter was terrified of her husband, but she was also tired of being beaten and smothered, and her life and her family's lives threatened every time he got angry or had a bad day. He still was not working, and they had been married for over a year. She wanted to come home, So she took off work early so we could leave before he got there to pick her up. He came looking for her, and I would not let him in the house. Her dad was at work. He wouldn't leave, so I called the police, and they made him leave, but not before they told him she was in the house and was going to sue for divorce. On a very cold Sunday morning, the day before he was to report to jail, I had the flu and did not go to church that morning with my husband. When he came home from church, he fixed us lunch. After lunch, he went outside to change the oil in the truck. Our son-in-law knocked on the door. When I went to the door, he just pushed his way past me, saying he had to talk to me. He had on a very large, heavy coat, which I did not think was unusual, and it was because of the weather. He started pacing the floor and asking where my daughter was. I told him she wasn't here, and he said he needed to talk to her. He kept pacing the floor and finally saw something of hers and grabbed it and started going up the steps, saying he was going to put it in her room, and did not listen to me when I told him not to go upstairs. He was there long enough for me to feel uncomfortable, so I stood at the bottom of the steps and yelled for my husband, who was outside. He didn't hear me, but our son-in-law did, and he came down the stairs very quickly. I went back and sat down on the couch. I was feeling really nervous. Our son-in-law went to the back of the house, toward the part of the house that the door we used was located. He went into the bathroom, then he came into the living room and stood looking out the window and asked me how I would feel if I was going to be locked up for a year and could not have sex. I didn't answer him. He then asked me how I would feel if my husband was no longer around. I told him not to talk stupid and how I felt about sex was none of his business. He then went back toward the bathroom and the back door. I was sitting on the couch and my husband was still changing the oil. Then I heard a loud noise. I wasn't sure if it was a backfire or a gunshot. I remember thinking, my husband is going to be angry if he's shooting over his head just to make him mad. Before I realized I had moved, I was on my way to the back part of the house, but before I could get out of the room, our son-in-law stopped me by pointing a gun at me and telling me to get upstairs. I told him I wanted to check on my husband. He said, "Get up the stairs now. There is nothing you can do for him." I blew his head off. "And if you don't get upstairs, I'll shoot you too." When we got upstairs, he took me to the back bedroom where there was no heat. He took me to that room because there was a walk-in closet and a double bed in that room. He showed me his knife while still pointing his gun at me. He told me to take my clothes off. I was wearing thick socks, a flannel granny gown, and a heavy quilted bathrobe and my underwear. All the time I was begging him to let me just check on my husband, and he repeatedly told me that he had blown his head off and I couldn't do anything for him. I just could not believe he had done that. I was convinced he had wounded him, but he was going to be okay if I could just help him. He made me strip off my clothes and told me to get in the walk-in closet. I was trying to talk him into stop and not do anything else, and while he was telling me how bad he had hurt my husband, I tried to get my hands on the gun. He told me to stop, and he pointed the gun at my head. And then he said, "Don't try that again." He then told me not to try that anymore because the one in him, and it was not God, was stronger than the one in me, which was God. He then told me to get into the closet, and if I came out of the closet or opened the door, he would kill me. I heard him start down the stairs once or twice and then come back and open the door to see what I was doing before he went all the way down the steps. There was no heat and no light in the closet, so I felt the clothes until I felt my mother's robe, and I pulled it off the hanger, wrapped it around me. When he came back upstairs to let me out of the closet, he motioned for me to drop the robe. When I came out, he told me to sit on the edge of the bed. I stopped after I got out of the closet and tried to talk him out of doing this. He kept insisting that I sit on the edge of the bed, and he started to rape me. He continued to hold the gun to my head. I continued to plead with him to let me help my husband. I told him if he would let me help my husband, I would try to do whatever he wanted me to. He made the statement while raping me that if he hadn't done that to my husband, I wouldn't let him do this to me. And I told him, I'm not letting you anyway. You've got a gun to my head. All the time I was begging him to stop and to let me help my husband. I never stopped trying to talk him out of doing what he was doing or wanting him to let me help my husband. He started telling me then that there were 4 ways he could kill me. One was with the gun, one was with the knife, one was with the pillow, and one was with an electric cord. When he finished raping me 3 times, he put the gun down on the dresser while he was trying to tie his shoes standing on one foot. I made a lunge for the gun. He got it first, and again he pointed the gun at my head, and he said, "Don't try that again." He reached and picked up the knife and started cutting a cord from a lamp and grabbed 3 extension cords. He then made me lay on the bed in a spread eagle position while he tied me to all 4 corners of the bed. He started to leave and then sat down on the steps where I couldn't see him and began to talk to me. He got up from the steps and came to the doorway, and he gave me a message to give to my daughter. He threw his hands up in the air, still holding the gun, and said, "I can't believe I have done this." He said this a few times, and then he told me to tell my daughter he was sorry and that he loved her. He started down the steps a few times and stopped and came to the door to see if I was going to be able to get loose. Well, he finally left, and I started screaming, crying, and pulling at the cords he had tied me with. I have no idea how long I pulled at the cords before I finally broke one hand free. I was shaking so badly that I could not untie them, and I had to break them too. When I finally got free, I came downstairs to find my husband. I found the blood by the refrigerator, in the entrance that was partially covered by throw rugs, and saw where the blood went into the bathroom. When I opened the bathroom door, I saw my husband laying face down. I kept trying to talk him into getting up, or to at least talk to me. I don't know how long I tried that, but he couldn't do either one. I started running from door to door, trying to get a neighbor to call the police because my husband was hurt. I didn't know which of my neighbors went for help, but it seemed like it was forever before they got here. I remember one of my neighbors finally got my arms from around my husband by telling me I needed to get dressed before the police got there because they would need my gown. I don't even remember when I put it back on because I was tied to the bed. I didn't have anything on. I remember my neighbor promised to stand outside my bedroom door to protect me while I changed clothes. I do remember when I came downstairs, they wouldn't let me go back to my husband. I was in shock and don't remember some of the things that happened while the police was there. But I do remember they wouldn't let me go with my husband, and they told me that he didn't make it. My heart wouldn't believe that, and my mind wouldn't accept that either. I do know that after the trip to the hospital and the rape exam, I was taken to the sheriff's office and questioned. I don't remember how long it took, but I think they taped it, and I'm not sure, but I think my daughter was with me. I'm not sure if she was there during my statement or afterwards, but I remember starting to leave, and they rushed me out a different way, because when I started down the corridor, they started up the other end of the same corridor with him. I was then taken to a relative's house where the rest of my children and my mother were waiting. I was in such bad shape, they called my doctor and explained what had taken place, and he phoned in a prescription for me. I don't remember some of those days. My family was advised not to take me to the hospital until after I testified in front of the grand jury, which was 8 days. I know I threw up for 3 weeks, day and night, even when my medicine had me so sleepy I couldn't stay awake. My pastor and his wife drove me to the grand jury hearing. My mother was too ill, and my dad lived several miles away, so he met me there with my older brother. My children were there. I don't remember how they got there, but I know I was shaking so severely during the grand jury testimony that someone had to hold on to me while I was testifying, and after a while I started throwing up and couldn't answer any more questions. They told my family to take me straight to the hospital emergency room. I was there 2 weeks. I was told that I had to stay for 24 hours after I quit throwing up. I do know that I woke up one morning and wanted to take a shower. On the way back from the shower, I talked to my doctor. He said I could go home the next day if I didn't throw up anymore. When I got out of the hospital, I found out my dad had had a heart attack after I testified in front of the grand jury. He had to have surgery. They allowed my mother to tell me that because they said I wouldn't remember it anyway. They were right. The wire that they used to hold Dad's chest together cut right through his rib bones, and he had to have surgery again 3 days later. I decided to go back to my house to live when I got out of the hospital against everyone's advice. It was my home. I wanted to be home. So my mother came to stay with me. I tried to be very strong around my mother and kids. My mother went to bed around 6. I was afraid to stay in the house with the lights on, and I was afraid to leave the house. Every time I left the house and came home after dark, I could see my son-in-law's face in my windows, and after I ran into the house, I knew he was outside looking in my windows. I was afraid to go upstairs to bed and afraid to sleep downstairs. I did not want my mother to know that I was so afraid because it would upset her. I would turn all the lights off and sit on the floor or on the steps until I couldn't stand it any longer. Then I would crawl to the phone hanging on the kitchen wall, pull it down to the floor, and call the jail to see if he was still locked up. They were very patient with me and told me I could call any time. Anytime I wanted to, and as many times as it took to make me feel safe. I was afraid to go anywhere, and yet I was afraid to stay at home. I was afraid to be alone, and I was afraid to be with people. My children and my mother became very anxious about me, even though they had no idea how afraid I was. They became very paranoid about my getting hurt. They would call me dozens of times a day. If they called and didn't get an answer in 3 or 4 rings, they called the police or the sheriff's office and asked them to come to the house and check on me. I tried to remember to always let them know where I was and the number to reach me. I would get 2 and 3 calls an hour from them, just checking to see if I was okay. There have been several times when my house has been broken into while I was asleep upstairs. Things would be taken, the downstairs bathroom used and not flushed, and a door left unlocked. The next time the item that had been taken would be brought back, put on my kitchen table, the bathroom used, not flushed, and a door left unlocked. A couple of times my back door was kicked open. Nothing was taken, and when it was always brought back and put in a different spot than it was when it was taken. Police reports were made, and the police made frequent trips to my house. My house burnt 1 year and 11 days after my husband was killed. When I had my house built back, I had metal doors put in, and that stopped the entries. During this period of time, I was in a constant state of shock. I received letters saying that my husband's stone had been installed in his grave. I had a map of the location of his gravesite and made several trips to visit him, so I knew where the grave was located. Well, I searched for the stone for hours, walked the entire area of the cemetery several times. One of the items was a map of where my husband's grave was. It was put back on the kitchen table, and that was how I knew where to go for visits. Well, after 2 days of looking, I was pretty hysterical. I couldn't find the gravestone, I couldn't find anyone at the office. When I finally got someone at the office, they sent me another map. The same spot that I had been visiting was marked as his grave. Still, the stone was not there. By that time, my mind was pretty well spent. Finally, I had found someone in the garage at the cemetery. They got out their records and took me to the spot where my husband was buried. Both maps from the main office was wrong. The stone was there. No one can begin to imagine how what my son-in-law did that day has affected me, my children, my grandchildren, and my husband's family, and even his own. Over 3 years later, I still could not go anywhere or talk to anyone without feeling very real fear. My sister went to a supervisor where she worked and asked for an employment application for me to work in the kitchen. I still couldn't deal with people, and she explained why she was doing this for me, and I was hired before my application was even turned in. I was not even able to fill out the application by myself, even though I had more education than my sisters, and I was the one they always come to for help. I needed them that day. When I wanted to change jobs for more money and not have to work every weekend, my other sister got an application for me where she worked. By this time, I didn't want her to get the job for me. I wanted to try myself. Someone helped me fill out the application and I turned it in. I was terrified when I had to go inside the factory and talk to someone. I forced myself to call 3 or 4 times a week to check on my application for 2 months before I was hired. My husband's family blamed us and has had nothing to do with us since his death, not even at the funeral. My children and grandchildren lost an entire family. Losing their dad was the biggest loss they could have had, and then to lose their grandparents, uncles, aunts, and cousins, all because of someone's pride. My children turned to alcohol and drugs to cope with what happened to their mom and their dad. My youngest daughter still carries around a very heavy load of guilt that really and truly is not hers. She still blames herself because she couldn't protect her dad and me. My husband and I had kept a little boy from the time he was 3 months old until my husband was killed, and I kept him until he was 6.5 years old. I was not mentally able to take care of him. He was adopted and mistreated for 8 years before I found out and brought him home and adopted him myself. He also turned to alcohol and drugs as a coping method. My life, the life of my 4 children, my grandchildren, my dad, my brothers, sisters, my husband's parents and brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews and my ex-son-in-law's family have all been severely affected by one man's act of revenge. Just because my daughter had the audacity to divorce him, even though in the trial it was brought out that he had hunted up his ex-girlfriend and asked her to take him back if his wife did divorce him. He had been bothering her for quite a while, and she even had to call the police on him. Just because of his hurt pride, I have lost my soulmate, my best friend, the person I intended to share the rest of my life with. My children lost a great father and friend. My grandchildren lost a wonderful grandfather. They will never know how having a wonderful grandfather could have enriched their lives. Our lives will never be the same. Someone decided his hurt pride was worth ruining the lives of my family, my husband's family, and even his own family. We've picked up the pieces of our lives and have done the best we can, but it will never be the same. He took control of our lives. I had no control of my life that day as I looked down the barrel of the gun pointed at my head. I was powerless to stop all the damage he was doing. When asked at the trial why I did not fight back when he was raping me, I said he had a gun at my head and I didn't want to get shot. That's the only answer I had. Does that sound like I was in control of my own life? No. If I had not been stripped of making decisions regarding my life, my husband would still be alive. My children would still have their father. My grandchildren would have a grandpa, and my in-laws would still have their youngest son. Do I have flashbacks and relive the acts he committed every day? No. Did it change my life and the way I feel about things and the way I do things? Yes, every day. It has affected the way I think, the way I feel about certain things and people, and the way I still cannot go into a strange city or a place alone. If I'm not familiar with my surroundings or where I'm going, I cannot go alone. I know God brought me through this for a reason. I am not this strong. God is. And I feel He brought me through this to help other people. After several years of this happening, the county got a hold of me and they wanted me to find out what we missed and loved the most about him. So I went to my children after being asked if I would like to speak about him today. I called our children and asked if they would like to tell me what they would always remember most about their dad. They said they would always remember his laughter and his heart. His laughter was contagious, and we knew his heart was full of love. It wasn't his size that made him a gentle giant. It was his heart. We never had to wonder if he loved us. He adopted my 3 teenagers. He chose them. He chose to be their dad. That was the best gift he could ever have given to us. My grandchild's point of view, we will always miss the papa that we never had. But we know that he was a wonderful man because of the things we hear and the pictures we see of us with him. They were right. Everyone that knew him knew the 3 most important things to him were God, family, and life, in that order. He loved God above all. Next, he loved his family and would do all in his power to protect them, even if it cost him his life. And that is exactly what it cost. So the thing we all remember most about him was his laughter and his ability to love. We think that is quite a legacy. As a husband, a dad, he loved and was loved very much, and we miss him each and every day. I hope we were able to let him know how much we loved him, because he surely loved us. My husband, their dad, our best friend, a man of so few words that could say so much with just a look. We love him, we miss him, and we always will.
So that's hard, Jane. That was hard for me to get through that myself. And, I don't know how somebody could get through that. And, you'll have to forgive me for that. But, you're sitting here as as living proof that after such a tragedy, that was 2 tragedies in one event. And, you're sitting here as a living example that you can overcome these things. These things don't have to destroy your life. And there is life after tragedy. And but now some of the questions that we're going to ask you, if you don't want to answer them, you don't have to answer them. And I know that you'll tell me you don't know if you don't know, but my first question to you, Jane, would be, as a Christian when this happened, and I've seen this before, how could you not turn on God after this and blame God for allowing this to happen to you?
Well, I've heard about God all my life. My grandmother and my mother were very, very strong Christians, and in the Bible it says that God will not let any more come upon us than we are able to bear. But the only reason we're able to bear that is if we turn to Him and let Him help us. If we let Him help us, then I was able to make it because God was there. He was there. I turned to Him every day, and I would say, God, you're going to have to help me through this. You're going to have to help. I can't do this alone. I'm not that strong. But He is.
So you never blamed Him for it? You knew that somehow that God would get you through it?
I knew that He would not let me go through that if there wasn't a reason.
Yeah.
I wasn't strong enough to go through it, so I knew that I had to depend on Him to get me through that and to help me find out what the reason was and how to help. Because I believe if it wasn't for the fact that He wanted me to help other people in situations like this, or before they get into situations like this, He wouldn't have let me go through all that. Well, He had a reason.
Right. Now, explain to me, now how many years ago was
right
that?
Now it's been 33.
33 years. After this, before, I don't know, so many questions run around my head. You said that you, for quite a while, that you could see His face in all the windows of your house. How long did it take you to start getting your life back together? How long did this go before you come to grips with things and allowed God to start the healing process, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask?
Well, it was different periods of time and different things that I went through. It's just like, it was easy for me to, I can't say it was easy, that's not the right word. There was several things that He helped me get through in a couple of years.
Like in stages, was
yes, it was, and then just like, it's been 33 years, I still cannot go someplace by myself that I've never been, or that I haven't been there.
Right.
But it's because I'm afraid I'll get lost. I think it's more like that than it is because I don't see His face anymore.
Jane, I'd like to ask you a question. After all these years, have you forgiven Him?
Okay. I forgave Him years and years ago, but I would say, God, I forgive him, but I want him to suffer every day. Okay? One night about
Have you ever asked for forgiveness?
No.
Never?
No, but several years after this happened, matter of fact, I guess it was probably about 29 years or 30 years after it happened, I thought I had forgiven him. And one of our preachers got on the pulpit and preached about unconditional forgiveness. And it struck me when he was preaching, and I thought,
you cut you.
I put a condition on that.
Yeah.
God, you know that I cannot do this on my own. Mm-hmm. Please help me to unconditionally forgive him, because I don't want you to put a condition on me that you will forgive me of everything but this. So I told him, I said, God, I've been putting a condition on it, and I didn't even realize it. But I didn't want a condition on me, so I had to learn to not put a condition on him. And I have. God has brought me through that stage.
Right. Now, that's a big step, Jane, I tell you. And because as human beings, we hold grudges. And, we get all bent out of shape over so the minute, just senseless stuff that we allow to divide us from our families, our friends, our neighbors, and we'll hold grudges over this stupid stuff. But for you to, you must have really been serious about your relationship with God in order for you to come to this point where somebody that just had murdered your husband and just had raped you and was abusing your daughter. That's supernatural.
It is.
That is not it's not in the human capacity, I don't think, to Dave have that kind of forgiveness, because that's a lot of pain, brother.
Unless Jesus said this, he says, "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." This is a pretty tall order. And you think about it, how can we possibly love one another as Christ loved us, unless it's not us, it's Christ in us that gives us the ability to forgive and to love one another. It's not the flesh. The flesh says, kill that person, murder him, vengeance, and that's the way the flesh is. The flesh's desire is to get even.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I know that without God, I could not have ever forgiven him. Not even with a condition on it.
I believe that.
I couldn't. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't. And that's why I had to say, God, help me. Mm-hmm. Help me to forgive unconditionally like you do me.
Exactly.
I make mistakes and I do things that I shouldn't do, and I need you to forgive me, and help me not do that again.
Yeah.
Well, if he's willing to do that for me, I'm not that special.
Right.
Why can't I forgive him?
It's been said that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It's like you drinking the poison expecting him to die. If you don't forgive, it's hurting you. It's not his act is totally separate from you. It's your heart that forgives him through Christ Jesus that has forgiven you much. Those who love much are forgiven much. That's the way it is. If you're forgiven much, you love much. And I know I've been forgiven a lot of stuff, but it's still a tough thing to do, though, because as you grow and walk with the Lord, you tend to want to go back and get back into the flesh, because I think it's familiar and it feels good, and that's why we do it. We hold unforgiveness because it feels good.
Well, one thing that God showed me is that if you do something to me and it really upsets me, it doesn't hurt you, it hurts me. Mm-hmm. As long as I feel that against you, you don't care.
Right, yeah.
You don't even care. It's not hurting you.
Right.
It's hurting me.
Exactly.
So turn loose.
Right.
Right.
Let God help you turn loose.
But that took you a while because now what was the process of that? Now I heard you was hearing the preacher. Okay, but now how long had this conditional forgiveness went on before you heard that message and realized what you was actually doing?
Probably about 20 years.
About 20 years, yeah. Yeah. And so God was merciful enough to give you that time to be in that right spot at the right time. And see, that's the thing about God, Dave, is He will set up events for our benefit that will help us along in this life. Now, I want to shift gears here a little bit. Well, first I want to do this. It's been like 33 years since this happened, right?
Right.
What are you doing today? What's going on in your life today? What have you done with this tragedy?
Okay. I do workshops, and I help with talking. I've been in prisons talking to offenders that have done the same crimes that happened to me. And they would get so angry because somebody did that to me. They would even ask me what his name was and said, "We'll take care of him." They didn't even realize at first that it was the same thing that they had done.
Right.
They did. That's the first time they had seen the
victim.
Yeah. And so I did that a lot, and a lot of it was in prisons, and a lot of it was law enforcement officers and judges and attorneys, and I've gone to lots of places to do a workshop like this. But this is the first time I've ever done it on the radio or anything like that.
Went big time public with it.
Yeah.
And why did you do this show?
Because I feel like that's what God let me go through, that is so that whenever He brought me out, that I would be able to help people. And that's the only reason that I do this publicly, even in small small groups, is because I feel like God brought me through this so that I could help others that are going through it or have gone through it, or to let them notice the signs before they get into that situation.
Right. Now, your daughter was abused physically and verbally in her relationship with this man, and did you never seen anything that would lead you to it would be this bad? You never seen anything that, because we know hindsight's 20/20, and it's too late by then and everything. But they live with you for a while and everything, and we don't always notice we don't know the future. But so many times we miss the signs, and bad things happen. I mean, was there a lot of guilt on you for not seeing things? Did you have to deal with the guilt and things like that? You shoulda, woulda, coulda, type of deal. And how long did it take you to get over that if that happened?
I really felt guilty because my daughter let herself go through that to protect me and her mother and her dad.
Right.
And I tried to tell her all the time, "Sweetheart, it's not your fault."
So she was blaming herself.
She still does.
Yeah.
She still does. And I keep telling her, "Sweetheart, it's not your fault. You didn't make him do that.
Right.
You did not get his dad's gun, and you did not tell him to do this.
Right.
Jane.
You took a lot of abuse before we found out.
You know, the word says that the thief does not come except to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. That's what Jesus said. But evil does exist in the world.
Absolutely.
And this kind of evil that this man perpetrated on your family, well, it's beyond. I mean, it's beyond belief. It's so terrible that anybody, would have to go through anything like that. But I'm wondering though, what is this man's life like today? Do you have any idea?
He's in prison.
I know that, but what's he? Has he ever thought about repenting, or do you know if he ever?
He says he didn't do it.
You're kidding.
He told his uncle that he shot somebody, but he still denies that he raped me. And they found his semen inside of me. And when he was on the witness stand during the trial, and he said he didn't rape me, my attorney asked him, then how did your semen get in her? And he said, I don't know how she did that.
Obviously, he's kind of insane. He's crazy.
Well, it's just like he said. He thought the one in him was stronger than the one in me, but it wasn't.
Yeah, just full. I mean, he's full of the devil.
Well, in the end, here you are, and there he is. How long did he get in prison?
Okay, he got 25 years to life for the murder. He got 10 years, no, I think it was 3 years for using a gun. He still had the sentence to serve where it was gross imposition with my nieces, so he has to serve those 2 years. And he got, I'm not sure if it was 10 to 25 or 15 to 25 for 3 counts of rape each. But the appeals court overturned one count of kidnapping. He got 2 counts of kidnapping, and they overturned the one. And I can't remember how long he got for that, but the reason they turned it over is because there wasn't enough distance from the closet to the bed for it to be counted 2 different acts of kidnapping.
Right, yeah.
Will he ever see the light of day?
Yes.
He will?
If I don't go to court anymore.
Well, that's my next question. This is not completely over, and you'll have to deal with this the rest of your life. Now, how often do you go to the court, the parole board, or whatever you do? What's the procedure that you're going through now to do what you can to keep him behind bars? Because, we forgive people, Jane, and, we put as much behind us as we can. But that don't exempt them from the punishment that they deserve because of the harm they've caused. And I know you still want him to serve the rest of his life in prison, which he deserves that. And if he'd have got the death penalty, then he would have deserved that. But like I said, even though you've forgiven him, that's no free pass that you want him out of jail.
That's right, because the day he was sentenced, when the judge told him his sentence and they started to handcuff him, he started to fight, and he ended up breaking quite a bit of the courtroom furniture. And as about 5 of them carried him out of the courtroom, I mean literally carried him out, he was screaming, "She can't keep me in here forever, and I'll get the rest of them when I get out."
Yeah.
And if knowing what he did before,
right.
you have to believe that he would really try
Take that seriously.
Yes. Yeah. So I forgive him for what he did to me, but I don't want, and my kids, I don't want him out so he can hurt somebody else.
Well, see, that remind me, Jane. He was given the weekend because of these sex charges on his children. If that judge would have put him behind bars then and there, don't know for sure, but this may not have happened. But it could have happened later down the road when he got out for that year. However, it may not have happened at all. You sure don't want, if you can keep him in there, you sure don't want to give him another chance to do something else. But what do you have to do now? Do you have to, how often do you have to go to court or anything like that to keep him in there?
When his attorney files different things
you got to wrap it up.
His sentence light, or to have him get out of
Gotcha, Jimmy. Go ahead.
Or have him get out. The county calls me and lets me know what he's doing, and asks me if I will go to court and testify again to try to keep him from getting out.
I gotta go.
Or try to
keep
Jimmy.
Him from doing Sue. Well, we gotta go. All right, Jimmy, thank you so much. Folks, I'm sorry to cut this short. This is on radio and unscheduled with Les Scambo. And we're out of here. God bless you.
And the band played on.